Hello. Yes. So environmentalism and the like has been a hot topic for I don't know decades now. For years upon years upon years, everybody's talking about how we needed to protect the things that are a part of nature. And I would just like to point out that there is at least one species that the environmental movement has neglected in supporting a species which in many places is denied the resources it needs to thrive such that it will prey on other animals, more endangered animals, or even its own members in order just to survive. And there have been technologies existent for decades that could improve the lot of this particular species, and and there are even technologies that are trying to be in development to try to find new develop new ecosystems for this species to go, so that it has more room to continue its growth without harming those things around it. This is not an endangered animal, as I said. It's quite common, but it has a vast impact on the ecosystem as a whole. And we have spent billions upon billions of dollars limiting the what this animal can do. Various organizations will tend to go out of their way to make sure this species cannot get anywhere. And it's rather, sad, because if we had spent the money on advancing this species goals, then it would get to the point, then it would really have a rather positive impact on the environment as a whole, because then there would be at least a much lesser need of this species to prey on other more endangered animals in places where resources and food are scarce, or on each other in the same areas. It would improve the waste products put out by the areas where they make their lives, make much more efficient use of space, and maybe even find other places where they can go that will not impact local ecology, but will be a safe and thriving place for them to develop. Now, I'm fairly certain some people have probably guessed by now what animal I'm talking about. I could go on, but I think I'll just stop here. That animal would be us. Everybody, talks about preserving other species, which is good. I do not want to live in a world without tigers and wolves, or without sharks and snakes, or sheep, or rabbits, or any of a number of other animals. I don't want to live in a world where the ocean is lifeless. I don't want to live in a world where there are no forests, or where there is a lot of pollution in the air. But the real truth of the matter, and I shouldn't say that, I should say my opinion of the truth of the matter, is that we have gone past the period, past limiting rampant misuse of the environment, straight into the limiting of our own potential. we are still using power stations and infrastructure, electrical lines, and the like that are as old as the 1920s, if not older, here in America. Just to talk about modern. This causes an immense waste of energy, which requires an immense production of energy to match our needs. And make no mistake, cities are a technology. They are a technology which allows us to make the greatest use out of the smallest space and put millions of people into one area. We aren't really the first to build cities, actually, though it would be ants and termites, and there's not really much difference. We have pollution, so do they. We have waste, so do they. We are the only self-managing species out there. If you were to give our level of control to pretty much anything else, then the world would have been dead by a long time ago. There is no off switch in a wolf. There's no off switch in our instincts either. What we have intellect, which allows us to realize that I don't need to eat right now. Some of us are having a little bit of issue with that, which is why obesity is on the rise, because, well, humanity and animals in general are not built with an off switch. Throughout the centuries, or the millennia really, the default is a situation of need, not a situation of plenty. As such, our instincts tell us to grab the plenty as soon as we see it and make use of it. It is our intellects which allow us to say, stop, save this for later. And it is that intellect which has allowed us to develop to the point we are. However, there are people that think that we're, I guess, no longer deserve to be a part of nature. There are people that think that our cities are somehow any different or any more our cities are dirtier and less important than say a termite mound. There are people who do not see, who will see the nature of something built by an ant or a beaver, which is a very wonderful thing, or a spider. If you want to see something really interesting, look at a spider's web. There are people who see that and see that it's built by an animal, and then they look at us and what we built, and instead of marveling, they think of it as arrogance on our part, that we should be tearing down nature for our own benefit. Never mind that that's what beavers do. They draw together debris. They create debris to build their dams. That's what the termites and the ants do. They build massive mounds that kill the plants and animals in a rather large distance around, so that for their own benefit. There are people who like to think that nature is clean and nice and kind, and that somehow the predators can eat and that's fine. But then a lion can eat a cow, a lion can eat a gazelle, and that's fine, but a human being cannot eat a fish or a chicken or cow, because that is wrong. And I'm not going to say all environmentalists are like this. I do want a world that is free, that there are still wild places. Other than cities. And trust me on this, you live in a city long enough, there is wildlife in cities. There is a thriving wildlife in cities. Thousands of species, large and small. Raccoons, opossums, skunks, foxes, coyotes, squirrels, birds, cats, dogs, human beings, and yes, we are a natural species. We are an apex predator. That is our place in the food chain. Our minds have put us there. Just like the power of a great white shark makes it an apex predator, the power of our intelligence makes us an apex predator. Now, again, we have been operating in America with, I'm going to focus on that. That sounds kind of ethnocentric, but I know the most about America being that I live here. And I'll get to in the poor places, the places with lots of misfortune around. We really can't do much about it without a war. And while Afghanistan and Iraq kind of provoked us first, and yeah, I don't care what people say about Iraq. If you try to have a former leader of another country assassinated, that's an act of war. That was plenty of reason for that. Anyway, off topic. Again, our infrastructure, a number of our power plants are ancient in the way of measuring such technology. Even if you were to stick to petroleum and coal, you could make it a lot more efficient just with the power plants and just with the electrical wire cables that run from the plants to the cities. A ton of power is lost, which means a ton of resources are lost, which means we waste more money on electricity than we really need to. It's not something that's very interesting to people because it's rather boring to repair old stuff. This is why our bridges are falling apart. This is what happened to Katrina. The federal government gives New Orleans, I don't know how much money, a certain amount of money to repair to do repairs on the area, and the city government decides to use that to spend on various projects that are requested by people that own construction companies related to members of the government. At least that's what I've heard. That's the reliable stuff I've heard. That, you know, we don't repair our roads. We don't repair our bridges. We make new ones. That's a waste. We have not changed our infrastructure. We have not changed our power plants in ages in most places. in France, where I've heard around 90%. I know the vast majority of the power, but I've heard the numbers are actually about 90% of the power is produced by nuclear power. They try to claim that nuclear power is a bad thing while they make most of their power off of it. Over here, we're still burning coal and petroleum, and that increases our need for those products tremendously. We have ways to deal with nuclear wastes that have been proven by all the best science that is at our disposal, but the facility for holding that waste lie unused because some panel somewhere said you can't prove it won't be safe past 10,000 years. Listen to this again. They did not argue that everything that we had says that you can make it safe up to 10,000 years. They argued that you can't make it safe past 10,000 years. Nuclear energy is a lot more efficient, and as long as you have ways to handle the waste, a lot less polluting than petroleum, coal, or other such methods. I mean, we have a nice sealed up, already built facility to hold the waste until we know something better for it. And yet we still live using power plants that were built in the 1920s and the 1940s in some cases, and in some cases older. Our modern society, the internet, the cell phones and all that, are built on an infrastructure that is starting to get close to 100 years old. And the age of that, even if it weren't getting old, the technology has become obsolete, and there are more efficient ways to do things. If you make things more efficient, you waste less. If you waste less, you have to use less, consume less. If we consume less, we can use that money on other things. Such as a breeding program for different different animals. Such as trying to sponsor companies to build up other weaker nations, because a strong ally is a lot better than a weak enemy. We could be spending a lot more money on the space program, because eventually, unless we want a massive war along the war or plague or other thing along the lines of World War II or the Black Death or the flu epidemic of the early 1900s, which was actually a lot worse than the Black Death from how many people it killed around the world. Unless we want something like that to decimate our population again and bring us down to, I guess, 10% of our numbers or more, kill billions upon billions, we are going to run out of room. And we are going to need those resources. And what's going to happen when we run out of those resources? We're just going to stop and start turning on each other. Eventually those resources come back, but everything's blocked. Because there are people out there that don't think a human being is part of nature. They think that because we built something, it's no longer natural. They think that somehow we're wrong simply by existing. Or, no, even worse than that, actually. Some actually do think that. But here's the worst. The worst thing, I think, are the people that talk about trying to protect nature. Nature doesn't care. Every animal on this planet could die. Nature would go on. The planet itself could erupt, struck by a meteor, crack and dissolve into millions of pieces of individual dust. Nature would go on. As humans, we are not even capable of destroying the planet. We can destroy a city. We can destroy cities. We can destroy countries. We can destroy each other. We can eliminate species from the planet. That last one, eliminating species, any other species can do that. We know, we can guess how many species man is responsible for eliminating. I wonder how many species are died out to the fire ant. I wonder how many species died out to the army ants in the Amazon when they go berserk for whatever reason. I wonder how many cats have driven an animal to extinction. Or about wolves. I wonder how many animals died off long before we ever encountered them because some other animal just killed them all. And even if you total all those up, the animals driven to extinction by other animals, it doesn't hold a candle to what happens just with natural disasters. Meteorite, volcano, disease, which you might say is another organism. We are small-time players in the field of driving things to extinction. The only thing that makes us look big is our own arrogance. Yeah, I think it's a shame to drive anything to extinction that you don't need to. I mean, there have been people that argued it was arrogance on our part to drive smallpox into extinction. I consider it self-defense. I mean, that is my fundamental problem with environmentalism. The idea that we are above nature. I believe in God. I was raised Catholic. I believe we are superior to the animals. And some people would tell me that's arrogant. But I have not seen animals on average be as self-aware as even the most base human being I've encountered. So I do believe that we are superior. And I don't think it has anything to do with what we look at. Like, I think we're the first animal, to our knowledge, maybe there was one that came before us, that we are an animal that is capable of holding a soul. And that the souls from Eden were waiting for an animal like us to go into. And then propagate. That is really far afield. And it has no bearing on the other thing. One of the reasons why we are so hard on the environment is because the environmentalists and others limit the way we can advance our technologies. It's not just environmentalists. Someone starts talking about tearing down a factory to build a new one, and people will protest because they don't want to lose their jobs for however long it takes to rebuild the factory. And and then also when that new factory gets built up, the old people might not get rehired. So we continue to have factories from the 1920s. No one wants to go to the extreme expense of going out to all the electrical cables between the power plants and the places of residence, because it's a lot of expense, and it looks like all we're doing is fixing something that's not broken. Or it doesn't look like we're doing anything. And people start, well, what did you just spend all this money on? Well, we fixed the wires. We fixed the electrical cables from Dallas to the power plant to Dallas, or the power plant to San Antonio. What, were they broken? Were they just destroyed so heavily that you had to replace the entire thing? No. They're simply almost 100 years old. I don't know how old the ones here are, but that's on average. American infrastructure was built in the 20s, 30s. We had a surge in the 50s and 60s, the highway system and all that. But a large majority of our infrastructure was built in the 20s and 30s. We are getting close to 100 years old. It is time to dig things out and replace them. I've said that several times. And I'm sure, we're wasting billions of dollars a year here in just in America on obsolete infrastructure. And that's billions of dollars that could go towards researching the problem of survival in space. The bone density issue, where people that are in space for an extended period of time start losing bone density, which is a highly dangerous thing that could result in death and make our attempt to get to Mars that much more difficult. It's billions of dollars that could be spent on building up industry for people to take part in. It's billions of dollars that could be used by people to donate to charities around the world. It's billions of dollars a year, most likely, that could be used much more effectively, because we're not using it right now. We're just throwing it away. And then there's our power stations. We should have converted really to nuclear power decades ago. Because we're not on nuclear power, our power plants still tend to spew stuff into the air. And while what human beings, even with all our power plants, put into air is a fraction of what even a single volcano can do, or even the entire ocean leaks out methane from the Earth's core. There are cracks in the Earth's core at the bottom of the ocean that leak out methane and other gases, which take some time but eventually get out of the ocean and into our atmosphere. More every year comes out of the ocean. Many times more comes out of the ocean, and I'm not talking about fish farting. I'm talking about the cracks in the earth. Many more times of the pollutant gases come out of the ocean than we could ever build, we could ever produce. And really, the only reason we think it's a pollution is because it's harmful to us. There are some organisms that actually feed on that stuff. It says, before you start minding your brother's business, before you start minding the mote in your brother's eye, attend to the beam in your own. I like to think that there is an environmental awareness in people in general today. I'd like to think that I could trust that if you start relaxing some of the ridiculous limitations put on our development, that we wouldn't go crazy out of control. And if we would, it would be individuals, not the entire species. People care more about the environment than environmentalists think. The environmentalists don't really know. They don't. A lot of them aren't the ones that live with it. I mean, the working class people who actually live out in the rural areas don't often have the money to do the sort of things, arrange the sort of things you find in the environmental movement. That's people that want to be good people. But they think they're above nature because they talk about protecting it. You can't protect something that's reality. Hardly God, because I don't believe nature itself has a consciousness or an awareness. It's just a set of rules created by God. And those rules govern everything. You can't make a crime against nature. There is no such thing as something unnatural. If something exists, there is a natural reason for it to exist. Whether it was built by a spider, a beaver, ants, or a human being. If it was built by a natural creature, it is therefore a natural structure. Artificial does not mean unnatural. Artificial means it's made from artifice, from skill. Natural, the way we use natural is really the way you should be saying it, is the raw state. Unworked state. But natural encompasses everything. We cannot, with our current level of technology, we can't threaten the planet. We could drop nuclear bombs and kill a lot of life on the planet. We can't threaten the planet. Unless there is some secret earthquake device I don't know about, which there might be. But yeah, we can't threaten the planet. And I think it's going too far to say we could kill all life on this planet with the nuclear bombs we have. We could kill a vast portion of it. We could find a way to put ourselves up in the scorebooks with some of the other past mass extinction events, which, regardless of what people think, We're not nowhere near close to that yet. We've only had 50,000 years, if that. We can't compete with what killed the dinosaurs, or the things that came before the dinosaurs, or the things that came before that, or the giant mammals that came after the dinosaurs. There have been mass extinctions coming regularly for eons. And you can't lay the blame for that on the feet of humans for the most part. Even the woolly mammoth, which people like to talk about humans driving to extinction. The woolly mammoth had a range and population that far exceeded ours. Well before, and then died off well before we reached a range and population that could seriously threaten them. The whole thing about driving them off cliffs, that works for some places. Seems remarkably wasteful for native peoples, for Aboriginal peoples. Those are both kind of lame terms. For the type of the primitive pre-civilized man, that's a waste. For a wolf, that's a waste. Instinct does not work that way. And those drawings on the pictures only really don't necessarily show that that's a regular thing. It might just be something that was important that happened once. I suppose I'm making myself an enemy of the environmentalist out there. I'm a conservationist. I'll agree to that. I want the animals that are around to still be around. However, I have to admit that if they can't adapt, then they will go extinct regardless. That's the way of nature. Yeah, we've been around 50,000 years. We've changed the playing field. We are a more effective predator than the majority of pretty much anything that exists. There are a lot of creatures that have not been able to adapt to that. Just like if you were to introduce cats to an island that did not have them previously. There were creatures that could not adapt to that, and they died out because of the cats. But that's all that we are, is another species, another predatorial species. If a set of, if it's some tigers had, or let's see, lions had, those kind of things. Some hyenas wandered out of Africa and managed to get off over into Asia and start causing trouble because there was nothing that quite managed to deal with them. Well, that might be not, because in Asia there are tigers. But say, you had a big cat get up into England, which some people think has happened. And then you got enough big cats that you started having a breeding population. And they wandered up there by themselves. They weren't brought. Who knows how. Or get up into Germany. Get a big cat up into Germany. And get us a breeding population up there. If you had natural movement like that, it would be encouraged. And I know it would be encouraged because it's being encouraged right now. People are concerned about, the pumas or the jaguars or leopards coming out of Central America up into the United States where they used to be. And some people are being very concerned of that for the safety reasons, because big cats are very dangerous. Some people are kind of happy because the big cats are coming back to North America. That population movement, a animal that's moving itself without any help from us, is regarded as natural. But when we move ourselves to an area, it's regarded as unnatural. The hypocrisy is just rife. We spend billions of dollars on charities and organizations and laws and lobbying and voting and other such things, trying to stop humanity from developing further. We don't even realize we're doing that. It's like, well, somebody starts suggesting a facility to hold nuclear waste, and suddenly everybody's saying, no, you can't carry the waste on my road. You can't carry the waste on my road. You can't carry the waste on my road. And if none of the states lets the waste be carried across any of their roads, then that facility never gets used, and so therefore you can't do anything with the waste. So instead of this facility that we have that is proven by all the means that we have available to us as safe for 10,000 years, we've got waste sitting around unsecured in places when it could be sitting safely. We've got old power plants putting out across electricity across old lines, burning tons upon tons of petroleum products and coal to produce a fraction of what nuclear energy could produce, and that fraction is put out across old electrical wiring and cables that turn that into a fraction of what is produced when the coal and the petroleum is burned. It's just kind of ludicrous. And I really hope we get our heads out of our masses. And yes, solar power would be nice, wind power would be nice. They're not. The technology we have right now does not make them reliable. Until they are, the best technology we have right now is the nuclear energy. I mean, we've had 2 major incidents in the last 40 or so years. If you go back to the 1970, maybe 50 years, you go back to 1960. I don't know exactly when Chernobyl was, or 3 Mile Island. But Chernobyl was a big mess, but 3 Mile Island was basically showed that the procedures we had for when things go wrong work. Because it was cleaned up and dealt with and pretty quickly. And there's still some lingering traces, but it's nothing like Chernobyl, where things went hideously wrong. So those 2 major incidences, one was handled, and only one really went out of control. People are overly afraid of it. But it's much more efficient and much less polluting in general. Puts out heat. That's what I have to say on the subject.